Welcome in to OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Wednesdays wherever you may be across this great land. I'll tell you this. I walked outside this morning to get my newspapers like the old man that I am, and it was in the 50s. And I thought to myself, okay, fall's not very far away. Now, next week, it's scheduled to be 95 degrees here in Nashville, so it may still be a little bit of time until the weather cools off a bit and it feels truly like football season. But this morning, in the 50s, when I went outside to get my newspapers, it definitely felt like college football and football in general was in the air. In fact, as soon as I finish this show, well, I've got one other show to do. But as soon as I finish those shows, I'm going to go watch my 8th grader play a football game, his second regular season game of the year today. And then I'm going to come back, and I'm probably going to watch a little bit of Tim Walz to see how his speech at the DNC goes. But I am eager for college football season to be back. A little bit of housekeeping. Next Thursday, Kelly Stewart, a.k.a. Kelly in Vegas, and I will do a Week 1 college football preview. Going to put up gambling picks for Georgia Tech, Florida State, probably tomorrow on OutKick. I'll talk about it with all of you. But that will be Week 0, and then we'll do the fade. Try to do it every Thursday-ish. I'm going to have to travel some, not surprisingly, and be on the road quite a bit during the season. Also, going to be doing things for Big Noon. I don't know that they've officially announced that, but I'll be around at a lot of the biggest games in the South again this year. I think it'll be, the 4th year in a row? I think it'll be the 4th year in a row that I participate in Big Noon, which is Fox's college football pregame show. So I'll be a part of that show as well, like I have been the last 3 seasons. So I am looking forward to that. But not a ton of sports news out there today, but there is big news in the political universe. RFK Jr. has announced that on Friday, the day after the DNC concludes, he is going to have a press conference to discuss the future of his candidacy. And I'm reading from his official website, Kennedy to address the nation. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will address the nation live on Friday about the present historical moment and his path forward at 2 p.m. Eastern on Friday. Tim Walz speaks tonight. Kamala Harris will speak tomorrow night. Then odds are RFK Jr. is going to drop out and endorse, that's what the odds makers would say, President Trump, who, oh, by the way, is also going to be having his own press conference on that same day, also rally, his own rally that same day in Phoenix, Arizona. What are the odds that RFK Jr. is going to drop out? According to the gambling markets, 99% chance. I don't know. Adam, look up. Have they officially broken the new 99% chance is pretty crazy. That is virtual certainty. Let me know, Adam, if they have officially broken the news that he is going to drop out. But the odds have skyrocketed on, just a few days ago. They were 50-50 whether or not he was going to drop out, and they had been around 50-50 for some time. But again, all the way up to 99%, as I am talking to all of you, that he is going to drop out. And maybe that news has officially even broken somewhere, because usually you don't get 99% chances unless it's officially official. Probably not coincidentally, as I am talking to all of you, Trump has now opened a 6-point gambling lead percentage-wise over Kamala Harris, even though we are in the midst of the DNC. We've had 2 days so far. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. It wasn't very long ago. In fact, just last week, Kamala Harris had opened up a 10 percentage point lead over Donald Trump. The odds market has now swung by 16% since Kamala Harris unveiled her economic plan. We'll see whether she gets any kind of bump out of her Thursday DNC address or whether Tim Walz gets any kind of bump. Usually you get a convention bump, a bounce in your favor based on the number of people who were watching. But it sounds like Trump and maybe RFK Jr. are going to try to steal that away by immediately having a rally on Friday in Phoenix, Arizona. Arizona, of course, one of the battleground states out there. And Adam is telling me, where is that source, Adam? Make sure it's somebody good because, again, there's a lot of rumors that are out there. But when you get to 99% chance that somebody is going to drop out, you're getting basically to nearly 100%, obviously, and that doesn't usually happen unless it's officially official. Trump, by the way, having a rally right now, and we'll see whether or not anything comes of that. But as we are speaking right now, President Trump has just left the bulletproof glass protection that he has surrounding him for an outdoor rally in Asheboro, North Carolina, to check and see whether someone who collapsed in the crowd at his rally was okay or not. I just shared that video. North Carolina, obviously another would-be battleground location, but Trump out as someone is receiving medical attention in his crowd to see whether that person is going to be okay or not. Trump, while speaking, said that person looks like they could use some help. So that is going on legitimately as we are speaking right now. Trump in Asheville, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the battleground states. And as we speak to you right now, in addition to opening up a 6% lead over Kamala Harris, Trump has now taken the lead to win Pennsylvania. And what I would say to all of you in general is Pennsylvania is basically this race. There is no way that Kamala Harris can basically be elected president of the United States without winning Pennsylvania. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, it's over. Trump could still win Michigan. He could still win Wisconsin and pair it with a few other states. But the math on this that's pretty crazy that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about is if Trump wins North Carolina and if Trump wins Georgia and Trump wins Pennsylvania, he's the president of the United States. Win those three states, North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, Trump wins the presidency. It doesn't even matter what happens in Nevada. It doesn't matter what happens in Arizona. It doesn't matter what happens in Michigan. It doesn't matter what happens in Wisconsin. Now, certainly there are other paths out there, but to me, the least complicated path for Trump to be elected president of the United States is simply to win Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. He's president of the United States. And Kamala has to block one of those three at a minimum to even have a chance. Now, there's other pathways, right? Like Trump could win North Carolina, Georgia. He could win Nevada. He could win Arizona. He could win Omaha. And he would win in the House of Representatives, the presidency. He could win Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, Arizona, one of Michigan or Wisconsin, and lose Pennsylvania, right? Like there are other pathways for Trump. There are many, in fact. But the simplest is North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania. He's the president of the United States. So Trump has taken the lead, now up to 6 percentage points. Still very close. It's 50-50 basically gambling market. But whatever momentum that Kamala Harris had has been significantly restricted. And indeed, she's moved 16 percentage points lower since she became the nominee. Other part of this, I think this is directly connected to RFK Jr. And if RFK Jr. drops out and endorses Trump, a couple of things. One, I think the average RFK Jr. voter would have been voting for Trump over Kamala, but was using RFK Jr. as a midway. I think RFK Jr. moving out of the presidential race actually hurts Kamala more than it hurts Trump, which is why the second part of this is, and I really think this may well happen, it would not stun me at all if we get an immediate pivot, and the pivot goes from Democrats fighting as hard as they possibly can to try to keep RFK Jr. off the ballot, to Democrats fighting as hard as they can to try to keep RFK Jr. on the ballot in the locations where he is, rather than allow his name to be removed because they think that RFK Jr. voters, even if he's not officially contesting the race, could still end up as someone that helps Kamala and hurts Trump. And this funny thing here is the only votes that Kamala Harris has ever gotten for president of the United States actually happened in 2020 when people in Iowa voted for her, but she dropped out of the presidential race before they could take her name off the ballot. So no one has ever voted in the history of American political voting, has never voted for Kamala Harris for president with her in the race. But some people in Iowa voted for her even though she had already dropped out. And now I think there are going to be Democrats, if RFK Jr. drops out and if he endorses Trump, that are going to be trying to argue, hey, we still want RFK Jr. on the ballot because anybody who goes and votes for RFK Jr. is more likely to be helping Kamala and hurting Trump. I just think it's funny how quickly that pivot will end up occurring in the event that it becomes a reality. Last night, Michelle Obama spoke, and she said her parents always distrusted people who took more than they needed. And the crowd started to cheer for Michelle Obama last night in Chicago when she told that story about her parents from Chicago being skeptical of people who took more than they needed. Now, look, I'm a capitalist. I am not skeptical of people who have built enormous wealth and decide to spend it as they see fit. But if I were Michelle Obama, I would have read that sentence and I would have said, maybe we can add something here so I don't look like a huge hypocrite. Barack and Michelle Obama have 3 houses that cost $10 million or more and or are worth $10 million or more now. Think about how crazy this is. They have a house in D.C., they have a house in Martha's Vineyard, and they have a house in Hawaii, each of which is valued at more than $10 million. Now, I'm not going to throw stones here. I have multiple houses. When those houses are complete, I will have multiple houses worth more than $10 million. Okay? I've been very fortunate. I feel incredibly fortunate. I'm happy to have those houses. We're building one in Brentwood, Nashville area. We're building one down on the beach. Okay? That's great. People say, oh, you shouldn't talk about this. I try to be honest with you about my financial conditions. We're going to have 2 houses that are worth, each of them, more than $10 million. So like the Obamas, the Travis family is very fortunate. I'm not going to lecture you, though, and say that my family didn't trust people who took more than they needed. Now, neither of my parents ever made more than $50,000 in a year. Both of them worked for the state of Tennessee basically for their entire lives. I was a public school kid, K to 12. I made $40,000 a year with 2 kids in 2011 when I started OutKick. I worried about paying off mortgages. I worried about being able to handle childcare expenses like a lot of you do today. I'm fortunate now. A little bit over a decade ago, I was not, okay? I worry about counterpunches, though. Any argument that I make, you can rest assured that I have thought through every potential counter argument to the argument that I make. Doesn't mean you're going to agree with me. It just means that if I flipped and you said, Clay, you have to argue the other side now, that I'm confident I could argue the other side as good or better than the side that I have chosen to argue. That's part of being a lawyer, right? You are paid to argue for your client to the most zealous degree that you can. That's the job of an advocate. That's the job of a lawyer. I don't begrudge anybody out there that wants to argue something other than me. This marketplace of ideas, good for them. But I feel like Michelle Obama just didn't even read this speech, or she's got really bad advisors, because if you have three $10 million plus houses and you're a $100 millionaire-ish, why would you try to argue that you need all that? You don't need it. It's a nice luxury to have, but it isn't needed. And is Michelle Obama arguing that her parents wouldn't trust her because of her wealth? There are lots of reasons to trust or distrust people on a long variety of levels. I actually think that in media, I have more trust in people who are wealthy because I think they're less likely to worry about needing a job. We had a meeting with a financial advisor yesterday. And I said, look, I love my jobs. I think I'm going to be doing these for the next 10, 20 years. I don't know. But he said, that's great. You don't have to work. It's true. I've said this before, but I think it's important. I know what it feels like to win the lottery. And the best feeling to me when you win the lottery is actually not to say I'm going to change everything in my life. It's to win the lottery, wake up, and live the same way that you did before. Because that suggests that you have lived yourself a life that is very fortunate, because you want to continue to do what you already do. I don't begrudge anybody who wins the lottery and they're like, I'm never doing this job again. I'm getting on the phone immediately. I'm calling my boss. I'm letting him know I'm done with it forever. A lot of people are like that. Most people don't like their jobs. I feel like I won the lottery and I woke up the next day and I want to keep doing exactly what I'm doing. So you may disagree with me. You may think that my arguments are full of crap. That's your right. You can take to the streets, take to the social media streets, and you can deride my arguments to the height of your ability. But what I argue doesn't really impact my lifestyle. I'm good. I can throw up the deuces, head to the beach, and chill for however many years of life I have left and never need to pick up my phone and respond to a text message again, never need to share any opinion. The reason why I do what I do is because I think it's important, but also because I love it. By the way, ABC News, RFK Jr. planning to drop out of the race by the end of the week. Sources familiar tell ABC News. Sources say he's leaning toward endorsing Trump, but say that the decision is not finalized, could still change. So it's probably trying to see if Kamala Harris will make an offer that he can't refuse, or they are trying to build up a little bit of suspense for Friday. But that news from ABC, who reported that at ABC, by the way? Adam, if you would. I will scroll through. I'm sure it's starting to echo throughout the Twitter streets, as I thought it might. Again, when the odds went to 99% that he was going to drop out, it's a pretty solid sign that it was going to end up taking place and occurring. And so that now is in the process of, it appears, laying out and what exactly is going to go there. So just worth contemplating as you go forward there. Again, I would be very surprised if RFK Jr. doesn't endorse Trump. I don't know if this was a calculated decision to leak this to try and take attention away from the DNC. Maybe it was. Certainly, if they announce it on Friday, it's an attempt to recapture the narrative arc in a substantial way as soon as the Democrat National Convention ends. But that is going on. I want to give credit. I've met Theo Vaughn, I think, a couple of times. I know he's got a popular podcast. He did the podcast with Trump, and it came out, and I watched a decent part of it. And a big part of it was a discussion between Theo Vaughn, who is a drug and alcohol recovering addict, that he was, by the way, that's a quad, story that is out there. Aaron Katarski, Will McDuffie, Olivia Rubin, Catherine Falders, all at ABC News reporting RFK Jr.'s out. So again, the odds markets basically told us that was likely. That is now the reality. The only drama left is, will he endorse Trump or not as he ends his independent presidential campaign? But I want to give credit to Theo Vaughn for the interview that he did. Big part of it was Trump discussing drug and alcohol addiction and the challenges that he has seen from it. And in particular, Trump was talking about his own brother, Fred, older brother who had a major alcohol addiction. And I thought it was a vulnerable version of Trump, the likes of which you don't see very often. He said he's never had alcohol because of what he saw the impact be on his brother, Fred, who was an alcoholic and ended up dying far too young as a result of that addiction. And Trump said in that interview with Theo Vaughn, I'm concerned that if I had ever consumed alcohol, I might have the same issues that my brother had. And I'm paraphrasing Trump. And so as a result, I chose to never consume alcohol because I didn't want to end up like my brother in the ravages of addiction. And this is good advice. If you are in a family, and I know many of you are, where drugs or alcohol and the addiction to either has been a huge part of your family's history, don't ever try it. Don't ever try drugs or alcohol because you may well have susceptible genetic characteristics in the same way that your father or your brother or your mother or your sister or your aunt, your uncle, whoever it is in your family that has not been able to handle alcohol and has dealt with addiction there or in drugs, the best way to ensure that you never have that issue is to never try either substance. Because Trump's point in the Theo Vaughn interview was a good one. Your body isn't aware of what it's missing if it never actually has that substance and tried. And Trump's made jokes before. I don't drink. Can you imagine what I would say or do if I did drink? And it's actually a recognition of Trump, a particular self-awareness. But I think probably many of you out there listening either have struggled with drugs and alcohol in your life, or you have a family or friend has. And maybe some of you decided when you were teenagers, when you were young people, that you wouldn't touch alcohol because you were concerned about what it might end up doing to you. I actually think it's fabulous advice. And of course, when we were kids, and I grew up, this was a huge part of the Reagan era, was the Just Say No campaign, DARE. We all had DARE t-shirts, black with red lettering, drug assistance recognition. I don't even remember what DARE stood for. Adam, look it up. I don't remember what DARE stood for, but if you're around my age, a huge part of 1980s era schooling, drug awareness resistance education. I believe that was what DARE stood for. Drug awareness resistance education. I think that's what DARE stood for. But the idea was don't do drugs. And some of you will remember back in the day, the public announcements, this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs with all the different eggs, like sizzling was one of those. I still remember them very well. We pivoted in my era from DARE to, by the time the early 90s started, DARE was left behind. But like many of you who are around my age, I had all the DARE t-shirts, black with red letters. In the early 90s, we all pivoted and started having AIDS assemblies. So in the early 90s, the fear went from drugs to you're all going to get AIDS and die. So we used drug abuse resistance education was DARE. If I messed that up, that's what it stood for. We all sat around and had all these different presentations, all of these different events surrounding AIDS, assemblies. We called them assemblies back in the day when I was at MLK, 7th to 12th grade. It felt like every week we had a new AIDS assembly. And we would have a speaker come in and she would be like, if you have sex, you're going to get AIDS and die. That's what they told us. Now, it turns out if you were heterosexual and you didn't use intravenous drugs, your odds of getting AIDS were like minuscule. But they convinced all of us in the early 90s, you're going to get AIDS and you're going to die if you have sex. They weren't as concerned about pregnancy. It was just that was going on. By the way, more breaking news. Trump has responded to the news, RFK Jr. considering dropping out and endorsing him. I would love that endorsement because I've always liked him. I haven't been asked that question yet. I like him a lot. I respect him a lot. I probably would if something like that would happen, whether Trump would put RFK Jr. in his administration. That is Trump reacting in real time, thanks to Adam, for the absolute latest there. Okay, a couple of other stories. Not getting a lot of attention. Kamala Harris's economic plans when it comes to trying to set prices is crazy. The average profit margin of Kroger, I believe, has been around 1.4% over the past several years. Grocery chains actually have some of the lowest margins of any business out there. Gas stations, by the way, make very little money off of gas itself and much more off of the convenience store. So everybody out there who's like, oh, the gas station, these prices, they're gouging us, the grocery store. No, those businesses by and large do not have great, huge profit margins. Grocery stores for sure. It's actually one of the most competitive, least price excessive businesses on the planet. But that was crazy, talking about, price caps, price gouging, all of that discussion last week from Kamala Harris. Now she has endorsed 45%, I'm rounding up, 45% capital gains rate and a tax on unrealized capital gains, which she is adopting from the Biden administration. This is bonkers, okay? Right now, for those of you who don't know, capital gain tax rate around 20%. That is, if you have an asset and you hold it for more than a year, then you pay 20% on whatever gain you realize when you sell it. If you hold it for less than a year, then you pay whatever the capital gains tax rate is that you are otherwise paying as an individual. Mine, I think, is like 39 or 40%, whatever it is. So there's a big difference for someone like me in profiting from a capital gain that is something that I would owe 20% on compared to 45%. 45% is bonkers. It's like basically there's no reason hardly to invest if you're going to have to pay a 45% capital gains rate. You would never sell. It would actually discourage the overall accumulation of tax dollars, because I can tell you, I wouldn't sell any asset if there's a 45% capital gains tax rate on it. I would hold it forever. Well, then they say, okay, we're going to tax your unrealized capital gain. That's even more bonkers. Okay, let's say I bought a stock for $10 and I rode that, say I bought 1 million shares of a $10 stock and I rode that stock up to, let's say, $30 a share. That would mean on paper, I would have a $30 million asset, right? $10 to $30, million shares. And I would have $20 million in capital gains, but only if I sold it. What Kamala Harris is saying is that the capital gain of $20 million should be taxed before it's sold, that is, before it's actually realized. Paper profits are being taxed. Problem with that, stocks go up and down. What if that $30 stock comes back to $5? Well, then I've got a $500,000 loss as opposed to a $5 million loss, as opposed to a $20 million profit. Do I get a refund? This is bonkers. I'm not sure it's constitutional, but anybody involved in finance or economics with a moderately functional brain will tell you this is absolutely insane, and it's an awful idea. And it actually could lead to wealthy people having to borrow money to pay taxes to avoid having to sell their asset. And it also could lead to fire sale of assets because you have to be able to pay your tax bill. This is just bonkers. It makes absolutely no sense. Finally, I want to close with the flag burning that's going on outside of the Democrat National Convention. Riley Gaines, I shared a video. She said, this is the only flag I've seen at the DNC. The flag somehow has become political. Democrats don't want the flag anywhere around their stage. Somehow the United States itself is unacceptable to them. Burning the flag because you disagree with an American policy, while protected under the First Amendment, to me, is indefensible. Because ultimately what it means is that you have no respect whatsoever for your country at all. And that's what you're seeing from the pro-Palestine protesters, the people that Joe Biden said they have a point in his speech on Monday night. They don't have a point. Israel had the right to defend itself. Hamas is an evil terrorist organization. If you are arguing in favor of Hamas, you have taken the side of the Nazis in World War II. You're a moron. You are an imbecile. The fact that the left wing in the United States can't distinguish good versus evil is a huge moral failing. The burning of the United States flag outside the DNC is evidence, even more so, of how absurd that all is. All right, lots of breaking news out there. Appreciate Adam giving me all that news on RFK Jr. We'll be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, with Clay and Buck, also with a bunch of television, I believe. But I'll look forward to seeing all of you guys tomorrow. Thanks for supporting OutKick. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. This has been OutKick, the show.